This meeting of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors will please come to order. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Director Carr?
Here.
Director Garcia has asked to be excused. Director Gokul Gandhi.
Here.
Director Jackson?
Here.
Director Leonard?
Here.
Director O'Halloran?
Here.
Director Seamson? Director Zombor?
Present.
Chair Herndon?
Present.
Oh. Director Seamson? Present. Chair Herndon?
Present.
We have 8 board members present.
The chair will now ask the secretary to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The chair invites any members of the audience who wish to participate to do so, and asks that those who do not wish to participate please remain silent during the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We acknowledge that Milwaukee lies on traditional Menominee, Potawatomi, and Ho-Chunk homeland along the southwest shores of Lake Michigan, part of North America's largest system of freshwater lakes. On this site, the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Kinnickinnick rivers meet, and the people of Wisconsin's Menominee, Ojibwa, Ho-Chunk and Oneida, and Mohegan sovereign nations remain present to this day. This meeting is being conducted in person from the Central Services Building in order to allow as much public access and participation as possible. This meeting is also being broadcast on WYMS Radio 88.9 FM and via live stream on the MPS website and on the MPS YouTube stream, the links to which may be found on the MPS website or the broadcast page. Before we begin tonight's meeting, we have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish-speaking members of our audience.
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a la Junta Escolar de las Escuelas Públicas de Milwaukee. Si desea escuchar esta reunión en español, por favor llame al 312-626-6799. Nuevamente, 312-626-6799 e introduzca la reunión 608-130-5362. Nuevamente, el número de reunión es 608-130-5362. Gracias.
Thank you. Before we move to our agenda, the chair will ask that we share in a moment of silence to commemorate the passing of the following members of the MPS community. Celilik Brown, a student from Obama, current. Ezel Connor, a retired principal from Bayview. Jake Dakajayan Harris, a student from Green Tree Preparatory. Jakarian King, a student from Jackson Elementary. Alaya Nirat, a student from Milwaukee School of Languages. Tyron Reese Jr., a student at River West Elementary. Nancy Heimbold, a retired physical therapist. Frances Townsell, a retired general education assistant at La Follette. The chair would also like to honor the passing of Charlene Harden, who served on the Milwaukee Board of School Directors for 3 terms from 1997 to 2009. During her time on the board, she was a champion for the safety of children. Her firm belief was that children are our future, regardless of what class they are in. If we could have a moment of silence, please. Thank you very much. Each month, the Milwaukee Board of School Directors accept the public's input both at the committee's meetings and through correspondence submitted to the Office of Board Governance. As this is the regular monthly meeting of the board, however, in accordance with board rules, the board will not be taking any public testimony on any items during tonight's meeting. Just as a reminder, Robert's Rules of Order dictate that all comments, questions, or requests should be directed to the chair, who will determine the most efficient way to address them. Please be respectful of the democratic process adhered to by the board. For the safety of all and to ensure the good order of the meeting, harassment or intimidation tactics of any kind will not be tolerated. Anyone persisting in disrupting this process will be asked to leave or will be escorted from the meeting and not allowed to return. Anyone ejected from the meeting may continue to listen to the meeting or access the agenda items online. Also, no one other than members of the board, designated staff, and those who have been invited to present or participate in items of business will be allowed on stage before, during, or after meetings of the board and its committees. Finally, for our listening audience, if you wish to access this evening's agenda items and attachments online, you may do so by visiting the Meetings, Agendas, and Minutes page on the MPS website and choosing Online Agendas. Now let us begin, Madam Secretary. What is our first item of business?
The first item is action on the minutes of the August 2023 special and regular meetings of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors.
Do any members of the board have corrections for the minutes of August 2023? Director Zambor.
Thank you, Chair Herndon. I have corrections that I would like to submit before we take action, so I move that we hold this item over until the next regular board meeting.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
So noted.
Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the superintendent?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do have the monthly report with possible action from the Superintendent of Schools. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Will the superintendent please present the report?
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. Keith Posley, Superintendent of Schools. This month's report outlines some of the district's highlights for the month. On September 5th, parents, officials, and staff come together at Maryland Avenue Montessori School to kick off the traditional start school year. Along with myself and board members, state representatives, Governor Tony Evers, and State Superintendent Dr. Jill Underley personally welcome Milwaukee Public School students to the 23-24 school year. After this spirited reception, guests had the opportunity to explore the school's classrooms and visit the beautiful garden. No school year is complete without a book bag giveaway. The Milwaukee Public Schools Department of Strategic Partnership and Customer Services, along with the community and local businesses, join forces to help support students towards a successful school year by providing backpacks filled with essential supplies to Milwaukee Public Schools students. Thanks to many of our partners and the Class Act School Supply Drive, 2,200 filled backpacks were distributed to Milwaukee Public Schools students across the district. On September 8th, the U.S. Department of Education Deputy Secretary Cindy Martin and the U.S. Congresswoman Gwen Moore visited Milwaukee Public Schools to witness firsthand the innovative explosion of Milwaukee Public Schools STEM, science, technology, education, and mathematics curriculum, which has been made possible through federal ESSER fundings. Riverside University High School was one of the locations visited, where we engaged with students from the Project Lead the Way and biomedical classes, and commending students for their innovative thinking. Martin applauded MPS students for the dedication applauded MPS for its dedication to STEM education, emphasizing the importance of equity, relevance, and rigorous STEM learning for all students. Browning Elementary School was one of just 26 schools nationwide honored as the U.S. Department of Education Green Ribbon School, Effective Environmental and Sustainability Education Award recipient. This award acknowledged Browning for its commitment to civic engagement, as well as its students' practical application of its knowledge to address sustainability and environmental issues. It is National Hispanic Heritage Month, a time that's to celebrate in our district as our students participate in a myriad of festivities to both educate and celebrate with students as we embrace the rich history of Hispanic culture. The recent MPS High School Enrollment Fair provided 8th grade students across the district the opportunity to explore high school and learn about their courses and extracurricular offerings. Students first visited schools during the week of September 18th. Parents were invited to attend the fair on Saturday and had a chance to tour schools, gather information, and also to enroll their child while at the fair. The registration period will remain open until October 31st, ensuring families have ample time to make informed choices for their child's high school education. On September 23rd, MPS hosted the 20th annual Florida Latino at South Division High School, drawing families with special need children to the event. Families had the opportunity to access free child care services and also activities that they engaged in activities that they participated in, variable discussions and learning sessions about special education services with the convenience of providing breakfast and lunch. Parents could fully engage in the event without concerns, ensuring a productive and a worry-free experience. Please see my full report for additional details, and thank you, and this concludes my report. Also, we will see a number of the students. I have 73 students that are here that will be coming down very shortly, who's a part of the Superintendent Advisory Council. 73 is the largest number that we have had to date. So those students will be coming in very shortly to say hello, and they will probably be leaving shortly after to catch their buses. So I would say, once they are in, if we could give them a round of applause, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. In the meanwhile, we could take the next item, Madam Secretary.
The next item is a communication from the superintendent, and that is action on a request to retire to closed session relative to crime detection and prevention strategies and follow-up to Resolution 2223R-6.
Thank you. I will ask the administration to present this item,
Okay.
after which the board may retire to a closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, paren 1, paren D, for the purpose of considering strategy for crime detection or prevention. Would the administration please present this item?
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. In December of 2022, the board passed Resolution 2223R-006, directing the administration to conduct a safety assessment. As such, the assessment was completed by Safe Havens International, and results were shared with the board as it's during the July 27 board meeting. This evening, the administration has here Mr. Sanchez, Miguel Sanchez, Regional Superintendent of the East Region, along with Michael Durham from Safe Haven International, which will present a presentation, and after the presentation, we'll be prepared to answer any questions that you may have. Miguel.
Madam President, members of the board, Miguel Sanchez, Regional Superintendent for the East Region. Tonight we have Mr. Michael Dorn, President from Safe Haven International. He is the leader of the group of folks that came in to prepare this report for us. Here is with you, Mr. Dorn.
President excuse me, President Herndon and members of the board. It's a pleasure to be back in your district. This is going to be a great deal of information very quickly. Just to restate, you know, when we do these assessments, they're very deep, and there are security-sensitive types of information that we will not be discussing in public because it would be quite dangerous for your district and others to do so. But we're going to give a very quick overview of a very detailed assessment. So we're Safe Havens International. We're a nonprofit K-12 focused school safety center, the largest K-12 school safety center in the world. With me is Feng Nguyen over here. We'll get to the other analysts in a minute, a little bit more about us. This was a school safety, security, climate, culture, and emergency preparedness assessment. It's the 5 life safety areas that we have expertise in. Fortunately, this was not done in response to some type of tragedy, as sometimes is the case. We really do appreciate the board being so proactive. A little bit about us. Again, we're the largest K-12 school safety center in the world. We've worked in 24 countries, all 50 states and U.S. territories. The bulk of our work, about 80%, are these types of projects. We've worked with probably 50 to 60 state agencies, including here in Wisconsin. We did major projects with the Wisconsin Homeland Security Council, developed the planning templates for the state of Wisconsin, trained 1,300 people how to do a light version of this type of assessment. We've worked with many federal agencies, just a few examples, many times with the U.S. Department of Education, the FBI, United States Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Navy, U.S. Army, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, which a lot of people aren't aware of, but it's a very important agency that protects our infrastructure, communications, power grids, and they have taken a very active and very productive role in making our schools safer. More recently, we've been working again with the U.S. Department of State to assist the Brazilian government due to a rash of just horrific mass casualty attacks in Brazil. In fact, we're about to host a group of 10 people from the Brazilian National Police, education system, and so forth. So these are just a few examples. Just one project example, our analysts wrote the IS-360 course for President Barack Obama's 2013 School Safety Initiative, which was in response to the tragedy at San Diego Elementary School. We had 7 days to write this course. Normal timeline is 6 months. It turned out very well, actually. It's still in use today. So we do a lot of different state level, federal level, and international projects. In addition to government entities, we work with a wide array of nonprofits and other non-governmental entities. A few examples: National Education Association. Another nonprofit we've done a lot of work with is PASS, the Partner Alliance for Safer Schools. They set recommended standards for security and communications technology for schools, National Safety Council, and quite a few others. Some of our OCs experienced just a few examples. We've trained 2 groups of high-ranking Israeli police officials who've come to Israel. 2 of us have been to Israel as well. Trinidad and Tobago, we keynoted their first 2 school violence, national school violence symposiums. We've been working with the Polish government to develop active shooter prevention and preparedness courses for students and staff at both K-12 and higher ed. Ministry of Education of India, we've actually, Fung and I went over there to train their personnel how to do something like this for the more than 1 billion students served in the school system there. And as I just mentioned, the Ministry of Education in Brazil, the National Police, national government of Brazil, and legislators and police officials from Brasilia. We've trained 600 of them so far, and now we're about to do on-site work with them. We've assessed more K-12 schools than probably any 10 organizations in the world, including the U.S. government. Over 9,000 K-12 schools to date for basically these types of assessments. That includes 7 of the largest public school systems in the United States, all the Jewish schools in the Boston area, districts of just every conceivable size, non-public schools, faith-based, so forth. Our analysts have published over 30 books in our field. This book right here, Fung was lead author on this. This is the most comprehensive book on the prevention and preparedness for hate crimes, active assailant, and terrorist attacks. That's a graduate level textbook. We had all of these personnel were actually on the ground here in Milwaukee over the course of the project. We also had additional personnel I'm not going to go into who did off-site support. That, and I'm pointing over there, that top row, I'm on the left. Next to me is Russell Bentley, who actually retires this Friday after 30 years of service as a school district police chief, deputy chief. Feng Nguyen, who's got 3 master's degrees, and just she does all of our project management reports. She's the hardest working human being I've ever seen. Dr. Sanaya Shepard was here with Fung and I for 3 days doing the strategic level interviews. She's published 16 books, worked in 12 countries, held very key positions with Georgia Office of Homeland Security, Georgia Department of Public Health, and was one of the rapid deployment team members for the Centers for Disease Control that would deploy to places like Rwanda, the Congo for outbreaks of Marburg virus. She's got an extensive mental health, public health background, as well as anti-terrorism. And then to the side of her is Stephanie Prater, who spent a lot of time here. She's the Deputy Chief of School Police. The next tier down, those are our senior analysts who were here doing a variety of processes we'll describe. I'm not going to go through all their backgrounds. On average, they've got over 20 years of K-12 specific safety experience. Most of them have assessed 200 to 300 schools in 10, 20, 30 states. Most of these people worked on our Broward County project after the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. These are very seasoned professionals who do a very thorough job. We started with off-site document review. The district gave us everything we asked for: policies, procedures, data, emergency plans. So we look at a lot of that stuff before ever on site. The district wanted actually some extra things about what we usually do for what I'm going to call the site assessments at each of the schools. From my understanding, this board wanted one thing most districts don't want, which actually made it kind of complicated for Mr. Sanchez, Mr. Negron, us, especially your building principals. You wanted unannounced penetration tests at every school, which we did. And I have to say, your principals were remarkable. We really kind of don't like doing that because these are very busy folks and we just pop up and they don't know we're coming. They were very gracious about that. So we did that. We actually, Fung broke our process up to make it more manageable for your building administrators. So we did traffic observations either morning or afternoon or both at the high schools. Traffic fatalities in school parking lots and drives are above homicide for fatalities on K-12 schools. So, that's a very important one to us. We did penetration testing and observation on your weapon screening processes to see if there's opportunities for improvement there. Interviews with a lot of school administrators, crisis scenario simulations with school administrators and staff at each of your schools. Let me see if I got that. Okay. So, for sake of time, I'm not going to show you the videos and audios, but basically our AV unit has filmed and recorded over 200 school crisis simulations. Their videos, their audios, tornado, medical emergency, hostage situation, just the things that happen the most often, and then the very rare but catastrophic things that we see in the media that are actually pretty atypical, but they're so catastrophic we better pay attention to them. What we do is show a 4-minute control video screen for trauma and then instruct them on what we need them to do. And we're not actually testing your people, we're testing this district and your public safety partners to see how well you've prepared them to handle a variety of emergency situations in real time. They have 30 seconds per scenario to tell us what they would do. We ran 1,674 of these scenarios with 282 personnel. 51 of those you can see are administrators, the rest are teachers, custodians, food service personnel, because you never know which employee will have a life-saving opportunity. We want to see if they're trained, they're empowered to make these difficult decisions. We ran 6 scenarios with each employee and then score the responses, and Fung's got a lot of data. We're giving feedback to Mr. Sanchez, Mr. Negron on some of the things we're recommending. It gives you very specific feedback. And again, your administrative staff and your administrators were just remarkable. I just don't know. We do a lot of this with bigger districts, smaller districts, but people were just extremely helpful to us, to the point we felt bad sometimes because they were so heavily tasked when we happened to show up. District level, Dr. Shepard, Fung, and I spent, I think, 3 days here. We met with, these are just a few, area directors, department heads, other key personnel, not just by title but by functional area. Things like human resources for pre-employment screening. We want to really get a cross-section of a whole array of things. And I didn't mention the building assessments. Our analysts go through a formal training process. I don't care how experienced they are. And then they use a special software tool that Fung and some IT people designed that's got over 300 items that we assess at each school. This is a very, very deep assessment. This assessment is meeting folks like this at the district level. We interviewed between those site assessments and here over 300 of your personnel. We found, and we're going to go through some positive, just some high points for positive and opportunities for improvement. We were extremely impressed, and a lot of people this covers, but especially your building administrators. Stephanie Prater's been doing this for 35 years, and she really felt for your building administrators. You've got staffing challenges that we're going to talk about, and these folks just, I'm not saying everybody here is perfect, but we didn't see some people will avail themselves of the excuses that we don't have enough people or this or that. These people were doing their dead level best to help us and do their job, and it was quite impressive. I mean, Stephanie got a little emotional talking to me at one point. The district, and this is broadly, this is school nursing, this is a lot of different departments, but we see lots of tangible evidence that you've expended considerable effort year after year to continually improve life safety. That's important to us. We don't want to see, oh, we did safety last year. It's a year-to-year thing. We were expert witnesses on the massive vaping litigation. Vaping was not an issue for most schools in this country in 2016. In 2018, 5 million students at middle and high school were current users of e-cigarettes. Most of those are addicts. That has turned districts upside down, right? So you have to constantly adapt. We see lots of evidence of just steady trying to make improvements with a lot of very logical things. The safety and security leadership, Mr. Sanchez, Mr. Negron, were very impressive to us, very forthright, very blunt, calling it like it is, warts and all. Here's what we think we do well. Here's some things we think we might be able to do better. How can you advise us? We found them to be very experienced, knowledgeable, and of particular importance to us, very mission-driven. They're not just focused on the security aspect. We want everybody involved with safety to focus on the mission of this district to educate students, help them succeed. And we very much saw that. Every school's got at least one Stop the Bleed kit, plus people trained. That's emergency hemorrhage control. The district has implemented a very robust and wide array of positive, I'm going to call behavioral approaches, social and emotional learning. There's just a bunch of these listed in the report. I'm just kind of hitting the high points, but you've got a very logical, you've looked at efficacy, and it's not just a couple of programs. You really tried to provide a lot of interventions. The data collection for MPS was very impressive to us. You're not just doing these things, you're measuring, how's this working, are we seeing improvements, which is incredibly important. We can throw solutions at these things all day long, but if we're not tracking and seeing, given what challenges we have and what resources, how effective is it? This absolutely floored Fung, and she can tell you off the top of her head sometimes. We're not typically comparing you to another, like right now we're assessing another district a few miles from here. And we're not saying them versus you, but I will tell you Fung's comment that your self-harm, non-suicide attempt self-harm, as well as suicide attempts, suicide ideation, your programs are, I'd say, easily among the top 5 we've seen in the United States. You've got this really down pat. I could go on and on about how important this is, but it's really impressive to us. Also, you can look right here at the bullying data. Definitions haven't changed, but if you go from the right to the left, you can see a very steady drop in bullying events that are matched to your efforts to address bullying in this district. That's the kind of stuff we want to see. So lots of good stuff to talk about. All your schools have automatic external defibrillators. A really good investment a few years ago was to move to digital radio communications. You've got good deployment, good operability. I can't tell you how important that is. You can buy gadgets all day long, but it's radios, public address, and office phones. Those are the things that are most reliable to save lives in an emergency, to prevent things. Radios, we like things that give you a daily benefit regardless of safety. Radios help your principals operate schools more efficiently. They prevent things, and they're really fast to communicate accurately in an emergency. That was a huge upgrade. You've moved to buzzer access control for all of your districts with integrated intercom and video. You have made some really good choices on your camera platforms. So some years back, probably trying to remember who all that was, you and Mr. Negron, probably IT facilities, a group of you came in and you picked a system called a Vigilon. Now, there's a better camera system called Axis, but when you look at the cost of it versus the difference, this is what we advise most of our clients to do. This is going to pay you big dividends. These are smart camera systems that are upgradable. They can do so many things that are now have positioned this district to do a lot of very impactful things. So I'm not going to get into too much detail on it, but that's a great camera system that can do a lot proactively, not just figuring out who did what after the fact. We want to not have things go wrong. You've got significant challenges. Most of our public school and many of our non-public school districts are facing a lot of similar challenges. The first one, the absolutely dramatic impact is social media. Vaping, I could talk to you about for days, how just destructive that has been for our districts. Video game effects, these are things coming to this district from the community. You didn't create them. It's like gang activity. They come to you. You have to deal with whatever the community, brings to you. Obviously, the impact of COVID has been just causing just major issues for school districts. We're seeing a lot of this around the country in recent years, increases in disruptive and seriously disruptive student misbehavior, budget challenges, state mandates that make it harder for you to do things, well-intended, but it makes things more complicated. So these and a bunch of others. These factors, this causes us the most concern of anything we've seen, and that's high vacancy rates, high turnover, food service, your safety personnel, teaching staff, and you're far from alone. I mean, you're actually doing amazingly well, as hard hit as you've been with this. But when we went in and would see principals that are, they've got 5 vacancies, and they're trying to do their job and those people's jobs too, that's going to affect almost everything I'm about to talk about. So, this is, and we really do feel for the board, superintendent, leadership team, this is not easy to address. This is unlike anything I've seen in my 43 years in this field, not just here, but just about everywhere we go. The highest paid school district in our state that pays building principals more than most superintendents make. One of, somebody that I know teaches in one of their high schools, they're running 25% of their kids are learning with subs all year long. It's just astounding to see this. It's having a big effect. If I could snap my fingers and do one thing, it'd be if we could fill all these vacancies with the high caliber people you need, that'd do more than a lot of the other stuff I'm talking about. Not an easy challenge, but one you're just faced with. And you're being very creative, really trying to address this. So, vacancy rates, high turnover, that's driving the stuff that follows. Student supervision. If you don't have enough staff, it's very difficult to supervise like you would want to. I know this is contentious with a lot of people, but you don't have a dedicated school resource officer program. People hit you with all types of data. We work the biggest cases out there, and I will tell you that we've got 6,000 people a year now being murdered in the United States, more than we did 3 years ago. For the first time in 20-some years, we've actually got an increase in school homicides. It's been more fluctual. Sandy Hook doubles the rate for the whole country, and then it drops back again. The homicide rate's actually much lower than 30 years ago, but the district's actually in a position where they really have no choice. You've got the state, you've got what you need to be able to do to protect this community's funding with being defensible in court. That said, I wouldn't have done it the way the state, my understanding of what they've done, doesn't necessarily need to be cops in all these schools. There's better ways that I would do it, and we've got some discussion with y'all and thoughts on that. One thing that really is a great opportunity for you, even though it's what we call an opportunity for improvement, it is very unusual this district doesn't have a 24/7, 365 communications center. We've had a lot of discussion about that. There's a lot of opportunities you have there. If you implement this, you won't know how you got by without it. And it's not just safety and emergency preparedness, it's good communications with the public. Right now, there is no one you can call at 2 in the morning from this district, unless you have somebody's home number. You're doing a lot of staff development for life safety, but we'd like to see more. Traffic safety, we've got observations on that. You've got, good all hazards emergency plans. We're going to recommend you use the Wisconsin model and kind of revamp those. That's got a lot to do with staffing. You don't have a full-time person devoted to emergency management, which is rather unusual for this size district. We've talked about, you've got the technology in place for access control, some improvements with the visitor screening. This is some data we looked at for your, just the inherent risk in this particular community. So we've had some good discussion on that. Some things to consider are, maybe the creation of full-time specialized multidisciplinary teams. Challenge here, we're talking to social workers. They said, look, you can give me 25 more social workers. We can't hire folks. I'll just have 25 more vacancies. So, a lot of this is not as easy as it might sound, but these are ways we want you to look over time. Mr. Sanchez, we just talked Monday. He's already doing a lot on this. We've given some suggestions to improve student supervision, some free training videos we have. Those are already being used. You're piloting electronic hall pass systems at some of your schools. That's some of the best money you can spend on security and it gives your students freedom back. They don't have to raise their hand in class and say, I have to go to the bathroom. No, you can't right now. I have diarrhea. This is to give freedom back to your kids. This will do so much for you. I think it's going to be very helpful for your bigger schools. Staff development, I'm running a little over, so I'm not going to get into each of these points, but a combination of web-based training, increasing the training by the safety department. They're already doing what they can, but got some ideas on that. There's some softwares you might be able to use to take a load off your principals, like drill management software, because they need all the help they can get with this stuff. And again, this is a big one. This right here, when you talk about what you'll get for the dollars you spend, you just won't even understand. It's like in the South, how did I go to school with no air conditioning? My God, how did they teach without it? This is what this will be like. And we've recommended some districts to look at that have done this particularly well, to give you some ideas to make something that fits for you. Traffic safety, I'm going to skip over. We talked about that. Here's some things, just really running over time here. So, these are some suggestions we had on how the district might approach, and I think some discussions already had with the Milwaukee Police Department. If we're going to have police in some fashion, what could that look like? Because they don't want this to go bad any more than you do. So we met with some of the command staff. They understand challenges. We get an understanding that they're ready to work with you to try to develop something that'll work. Understand that pulling, officers out of school, what that is resulting in around the country are often very short-staffed agencies. Instead of getting an officer who's acclimated to schools, who has advanced training, what we're getting are road officers who don't know how to work with your personnel, who don't have extra training, how to work with special needs students and so forth, and slow response times, and you've still got a lot of the same activity. There is no valid peer review research that will withstand court scrutiny that documents that adding SROs increases incarceration. There are a lot of people who will give you statistics, but when I testify in federal court, they look at methodology. The only time we're seeing a lot of those statistics, and to be clear, there's truth in general to the numbers. However, the data doesn't match what's often put out there, and the courts are routinely saying that's not admissible in court because it's not developed with proper methodology. If you look at what is admissible in court, the state of Virginia, students of all ethnicities, the majority prefer SROs. Now, that's like a lot of other things. How good are they? How well trained are they? How are they tasked? So there's a lot of detail. We stand ready to work with the district and whatever agencies to try to help with that process. We would just say do it thoughtfully, do it carefully, and don't get locked into what's been done in the past. There are other ways to integrate officers into a school district that I think will address a lot of the concerns that people have, that they feel very strongly about. And I think a lot of dialogue is important. I'm just saying that from a legal standard of care point, you really have to do something. Apparently from the legislative standpoint, you have to do something. So what I would say is let's look at how that can be done, see if the state will give you some leeway. I would not advise you to do it the way they did. I think there are better ways to do it than I know they mean well, but just putting cops in schools based on some data and not serving the whole district, I just think there's better ways to do it. We suggest some type of full-time person in the safety department. You got people working their heart outs on this, but you need somebody full-time to do this. We've talked with Mr. Sanchez, Mr. Negron on some ways to approach this, given budget limitations. Next step, superintendent tasked us with a few things. All of this stuff is either done or in progress. And again, we provide free technical phone calls, virtual calls, 2 years from now, 10 years from now, at no cost to this district. It's been our absolute pleasure and honor to work with this district. We're deeply impressed with what we're seeing. You've got a lot of immense challenges, but you've got a lot of good people working their hearts out on that. And we really appreciate your commitment to not wait till something terrible happens to say, let's look at this stuff. Thank you, and I'll entertain any communication, Chad.
Madam President, members of the board, Miguel Sanchez, Regional Superintendent. As you may recall, on July 27th, we met and spoke with the draft. And then we were looking at what can we put in place right now in lieu of what we have in front of us. So I'm very glad and pleased to share with you that since that time, the steering committee, which was Dr. Cotton, Mr. Negron, and myself, recruited regional champions for safety so every region has a champion, and helps us develop a strategy of how we're going to bring some of these ideas, some of these strategies back to the ground, right? In the spirit of shared leadership, we're getting their input. So during the first week of August, during PLI, Mr. Negron and his team presented to all our principals, and we have a revamped emphasis on student and staff safety during PLI. So we're very clear about things that we would like to see, things that we like to enhance, because that will be great for every child and every staff member and adult that visit our schools. Also, as I said before, the regional champions were identified, and now they work closely with us. One of the ideas that came out of them when we were talking about how can we get to our teachers to enhance safety practices with what we have. And they were very quick to respond that the videos, and one of the videos that we were reviewing already to show to staff, they say, like, we cannot wait till we get to the first staff meeting in October. We should present that video, the first safety video, during our organization time. So we did that. So now all of staff members are aware of the first part of the video. Now the second part, which is equally important and actually more detailed, that allows us to distinguish the roles and how to use safety and give us tips on how to better support our children when we're out in the open, right? That video is going to be discussed this Wednesday during PLI with principals and most likely be presented to staff at the next opportunity they have. So we would have opportunities to discuss, to share, and to show a video where proper safety enhancements are in place and where proper supervision of students in the open are modeled. Now remember, quick win, IDs. So our staff members are wearing IDs, and we're making sure that, as new staff members come on board, we get the forms ready, get them to an ID. Even our visitor procedure and policy has been revamped with our secretaries, reminded, like, make sure a screen at the door. And then when somebody comes in the building, make sure that if it's not a staff member, because we have staff members traveling from site to site, of course, make sure they sign in, they follow proper procedure, identification if they can, and they carry a badge. Now, things are going to happen, right? Random things happen, but we are sticking to the script, and more our people are getting used to it, because we also have the secret shopper, right? We had somebody from our safety division, unknown to even myself, I don't know if the superintendent knows him, but goes and as an ordinary human person being, goes into a building and then looks for areas of that we may need to address, or areas that we are doing pretty well, right? And a report is presented to regional superintendents, and of course, if there's areas to address, we will address them promptly. We're very glad that seldom are the areas that we need to address or the schools that we may have a mishap, but we're very on top of it as we continue with the secret shopper opportunity there. Finally, I will say that this Monday, in a marathonic visit to Atlanta and Macon, a delegation from MPS will travel to the city of Atlanta and then Macon to visit 3 school districts. Atlanta has about 50,000 children. They serve Fulton about 90,000, and Bibb County, it's about mid-20s. But why are we going there, right? We're going there because they have had a safety assessment before, and they have what Mr. Dorn just called a 24/7, 365 communications and life-saving monitoring center. And you may say, but why do we need that? We have safety in place. We have somebody that comes after dark if any emergency alarm goes off. Well, what we were able to find out during the conversation with Mr. Dorn, debating with the team and other people, is that actually this could be a cost-saving measure for our district. And this will give us the opportunity to have somebody in a dispatch center attend to the needs of a community member that may be in need, looking for a school, looking for a child that may have not arrived home and they may not have the means, but somebody from a remote site may look at that with help with video analytics that may be supported by our camera system and says, like, ma'am, sir, may I help you? Are you looking for so-and-so? And that person can direct. So we basically have our schools open 24/7. So we will probably have something ready for you if you wish about the visit. But it's going to be very quick. Monday night we get there, and Wednesday night we're back in town. We know there's a lot of work to be done in town. But we're excited about the opportunity to visit practices that have been put in place after a safety assessment, and more importantly, the idea of a dispatch center that may maximize what we already have and represent some cost savings measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Miguel. Also, I just would like to, before we go into questions, the team is here, the Superintendent Advisory. If you could please stand, all the Superintendent Advisory members from all of the schools. Thank you. Now we're ready for any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for that presentation, and I'd like to know if the board has comments at this time, or would they save them for executive session? What is the pleasure of the board?
Well, I'd like to give a thank you, and then I'll make a motion, if that's okay. Just, those of us who work in our schools and are out in them frequently know what a wonderful staff we have, and it's just really nice to hear that same message coming from someone from the outside looking in, that you see what we see every day. So thank you very much for that positive reinforcement, and not sure how to word this, but I move that we retire this item to executive session at the end of our board meeting.
Thank you very much. Director Gokul Gandhi?
I second that.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, are there any reports, communications from the board clerk, chief officer, Office of Board Governance?
Madam Chair, members of the board, just for the listening audience, if I'm understanding correctly, Director Seamson made a motion to go into closed session on this item,
That's right, I'm sorry.
and seconded by Director Gokul Gandhi. The question is, would you like to defer that closed session until the end of the meeting?
Yes.
So noted. The next item before the board, there are two communications from the board clerk, chief officer, Office of Board Governance. The first one is the legislative activities affecting Milwaukee Public Schools. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, President Herndon, members of the board. Chris Thiel, Office of Governmental Relations for MPS. Just following up, as we're now kind of working through the state budget activity, and school districts are kind of coming to terms with what occurred, putting their budgets together, and looking forward to a couple of dates in the next several weeks, and providing some background information that will hopefully be of use there. The final aid information that the state distributes to school districts typically comes forward on October 15th. That lands on a Sunday, so we'll either see it on the 13th or the 16th. And when we have that information in hand, school districts across the state will better be able to understand what their levies might be and make decisions to go forward to fund their school districts. As you will see in the attachment, in the past month, the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, they're the research director for the Wisconsin Association of School Business Officials, Ann Chapman, provided information that we've been discussing here as MPS, that we're in the same situation as our school districts across the state, that we're in a political season, budgets are always political, but now we're getting down to the nuts and bolts of what the funding looks like, boards across the state really are going to have to communicate to their constituents about what is going on, despite what they may or may not have heard from the state level. And as we've talked about consistently, we know that the state of Wisconsin has not provided per pupil funding that's kept pace with inflation for at least 16 years. Ms. Chapman outlines that in her work as well. The other thing, or another thing that comes up this time of year, and we don't know exactly when, but every year the state will put out the proficiency scores of our students. And so as you will see in the attachment, what often happens in the upcoming weeks is proficiency scores will come out, a discussion will take place, newspaper articles will be written, and often, and I don't think intentionally, but often only half the story is told. And so the two attachments that you have this evening in this board report remind us all that the state has control of what proficiency means. That the state constitution says that every child is entitled to a sound basic education, and then the state Supreme Court has further ruled what a sound basic education means. And the legislature itself has said that a sound basic education means the opportunity to be proficient. And what we know from this moment in 2011, and again, I've mentioned this in the past, but we know a lot about Act 10. We know that there was significant defunding of schools at that time. But in 2011 as well, the state dramatically increased the bar for what it means to be proficient. So the article points out that overnight our proficiency rates in Wisconsin dropped 40, 50 points. The other article from 2015 follows up and takes a look at what was happening at that time. Nationally, more school districts, more states were tying their cut scores to the National Assessment of Educational Progress, NAEP. And it was stated we need to do that as adults because we need to make sure that we're teaching students to the right levels and holding ourselves as adults accountable for that. We did that. And the analysis that you see in that second article points out that Wisconsin ranked second at that time in terms of how high we set our cut scores, only behind the state of New York. The reality of what we did in 2011 is we dramatically raised what it means to be proficient in the state of Wisconsin and dramatically reduced the opportunity to get there. We pulled, as a state, the state who controls the funding, pulled the funding out from under students in the same year that they dramatically raised the cut scores. So I'm bringing this up this evening because as we know, we are going to have a discussion about proficiency scores. The media, members of the public, boards across the state need to also remind ourselves that it's the adults who said at that time that they needed to be held accountable. And if we have not provided per pupil funding to keep pace with inflation, and as we've discussed nearly every time I come out here, our special education reimbursement levels are lowest or at the bottom of the country. Support for English learners, again, are bottom of the country. Are we providing that opportunity to be proficient? Let's integrate that conversation into what we know will be in the discussion in the upcoming weeks to really make sure we're telling the whole story around this so we don't have anybody pretending they're surprised when we point out that you can't set the scores this high but then pull the rug out from under kids. So happy to answer more questions about that if you have them or anything else going forward.
Thank you very much. Do board members have any questions or comments on this item? Director Leonard.
So to put that in perspective, because I have to say I read that probably 3 or 4 times today. The dates threw me off, and it took me a while to actually understand what they were saying. And I thought to myself, well, if this was a pro team, and we had set the standards to bring in these professional people that could really play the game, but we decided to reduce how much we pay them by 42% or whatever it would be, what would we expect those results to be? So we expect the same from our students. And money does count. It's a comment, but it does count. It matters. It's definitely important. So I just wanted to put that out there. And then I also noticed from the articles, I don't know which one it was. I think it was the second article. And she stated that 75% of Wisconsin school districts will lose anything they gain from the current $325 per student increase. If you can speak to any details of that, I looked at that, and it's pretty clear what she said, but if you have anything else to add to that, it'd be great to hear. Thank you.
President Herndon, Director Leonard, and I want to be clear, we know that we all have a responsibility, certainly, in terms of any proficiency scores that go out there. Every school district is working to make sure students succeed, but the state obviously has a role in that, and that's the point of me bringing that forward. The article that you reference is trying to help cut through what is the confusing reality of school funding in the state of Wisconsin. There was a revenue limit increase of $325 per pupil, but based on a number of factors, how much funding you had last year, where you are with something called declining enrollment, hold harmless. There are a number of different mechanisms that go into the school funding formula, particularly as it relates to the revenue limit. So I know when the budget was passed, things were being articulated as if everybody's getting $325 per pupil, just multiply 325 times your enrollment, that's how much money you get. That's not how it works. So what Ms. Chapman is pointing out here is not only the circumstance that we find ourselves in, but to your point, those school districts across the state, that even if state aid comes in and the state aid is higher, if your revenue limit lowers, that's what it is. It's a revenue limit. So you're not getting more money necessarily to spend on kids. If your revenue limit comes down, then the conversation is, okay, well, how much of that lowered level is coming from the state? How much of it is coming from your local property tax base? So it is confusing. And it's easy to say, oh, I thought everybody got 325. But, and it's a little bit of a complex article, but the reason we included it is because we're heading into that time. State aid's going to come in. People are going to hear a state aid number. Oh, MPS got X amount of state aid. That does not necessarily translate to money that can be spent on kids. That might mean your property taxes are going to go down. And those are real scenarios that are working. The other thing that I'll just mention in here is something called the school levy tax credit. You, at the end of October, all boards at the end of October will be setting your levies. They will be read at a certain amount. And then the state comes in with something called the school levy tax credit that will lower the levy. So school boards in Wisconsin are put in the position of levying a tax that is ultimately not really going to be what hits when those envelopes arrive at your door in December. It's much more sensible to put school boards in the position to take that levy tax credit money, put it here up front, so we're all being transparent and seeing how this is working. But I think when we get to that October, November, December period, we're also going to want to communicate to people, here's what your levy is, but here's this additional school levy tax credit money that came in that will reduce your taxes because it becomes a political issue. The other thing with that, just to remind everybody here, is that when the Blue Ribbon Commission report came out 5 or 6 years ago now, they recommended to themselves to not put any more money into the school levy tax credit because it confuses people, because it has all the elements I just described. They put more money, significantly more money, the school levy tax credit, and what we've heard articulated is we gave all this money, additional money to schools. That's not money to schools, it's a tax credit, right? So it's a little bit of a complex article, and we put it out there as a reference for people, because as we try to give these updates, we try to make it as simple as possible, but there is some of that additional information that can be useful.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, we can go to the next item.
The next communication is consideration and action to not renew the administrator contract for the position of Director of Office of Board Governance, Board Clerk, effective upon its expiration, March 31st, 2024. The recommendation is that the board determine how it wishes to proceed with this item.
What is the pleasure of the board with respect to this item?
I move that we defer this discussion until the closed session at the end of the board items.
Thank you. We would need a second on that.
A second.
Thank you, Director Leonard. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Madam Chair, if I'm understanding Director O'Halloran, it's to defer this item for consideration at the end of the meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Skip that then.
Thank you.
Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the Office of Accountability and Efficiency?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do have one communication from the Office of Accountability and Efficiency, and that is the monthly report with possible action. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Thank you. Go ahead, please. Mr. Chasen.
Thank you, Chair Herndon. Matt Chasen, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. That report is before you. I just wanted to share, it is not uncommon at the start of any school year. Our office sees an uptick in calls from parents or guardians regarding issues in a number of schools. And I just wanted to give a thanks to Dr. Catrice Cotton, who was sitting there, and her team. They provide very prompt assistance when we try to bring resolution to those concerns that come our way. So with that, happy to answer any questions you have.
Do board members have questions or wish to make comments on this item? Okay, seeing none, Madam Secretary, we can move to the next item.
The next item is the reports of the independent hearing officers of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors. And that is on the student expulsions.
Does the administration wish to make comments?
Good evening, President Herndon and members of the board. This evening, the administration is respectfully requesting the board to go into closed session to consider this item.
Thank you. May I have a motion, please? Director Zumber.
I move that the board retire to executive session for the purpose of considering disciplinary data of specific persons at the end of the full meeting.
Okay. Madam Secretary, I saw you kind of twisted a little bit.
Oh, no, I was just trying to figure out, Director Zomber, I just want to be sure, you're moving to defer this item until the end of the meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, but to retire to executive session.
So, Madam Chair, members of the board, once the item is up for consideration, a motion can be made, and then a second, and then the board can go into closed session. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Madam Secretary.
It has been noted.
Okay. So did you still want the roll call as you were stating?
Madam Chair, we do not need a roll call at this
Okay.
time, unless there is an objection to moving this item until the end of the meeting. So noted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, we can continue on, which would be with the reports of the standing committees.
The next item before the board will be the reports of the standing committees. The board, as is customary, will not be giving public testimony on these reports, as you have done that at the committee level. The first report up for consideration is that of the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Item number 2, action on recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments, and reclassifications, salary increases and decreases, and the limited term employment contracts exceeding 60 days has been set aside at the request of the administration.
Okay, do board members wish any other items to be set aside? Hearing none. Madam Secretary, we go to the next one, which is Committee on Parent and Community Engagement.
That is correct, and no items of this report have been set aside.
Okay, next would be the report of the Committee on Student Achievement and School Innovation.
And no items of this report have been set aside. Madam
Okay,
Chair?
then,
Are there any board members that would like to set aside any items from this report?
no, you're saying nothing.
The request is on record. Thank you.
Okay. May I please have a motion for the balance of the committee's reports? Will the secretary please call the roll after we get the motion?
I move we accept the balance of the committee reports.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Second?
Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director O'Halloran's motion to approve the balance of the committee report, seconded by Director Gokul Gandhi. On the motion as read, Director Carr?
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi?
Aye.
Director Jackson?
Aye.
Director Leonard?
Aye.
Director O'Halloran?
Aye.
Director Simpson?
Aye.
Director Zombor?
Aye.
Chair Herndon?
Aye.
That's 8 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam Secretary, what is the first item set aside?
The first item set aside is from the report on the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Item number 2, action on recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments and reclassifications, salary increases and decreases, and the limited term employment contracts exceeding 60 days has been set aside. Your committee put forward a recommendation that the board approve the item to be effective upon board approval. This item was set aside at the request of the administration.
What is the pleasure of the board, of the administration? Would you like to speak on this item?
Thank you, President Herndon, members of the board, Adrian Madeline, Chief Human Resources Officer. We requested to have this item pulled because we have an additional name that we weren't able to make it at the committee meeting. It came afterwards, and we thought we would bring it forward now instead of waiting another month until October.
Thank you. So did you wish to present the name now? Is that the deal?
President Herndon, members of the board, Adrian Madeline, Chief Human Resources Officer. Yes, the additional name is Willie Jude II for the Director 1 position for the Milwaukee Public Schools Foundation.
What is the pleasure of the board with respect to this item? Director O'Halloran.
I move that the board approves the promotions, appointments, leaves, and limited term employment contracts as listed in the attachment.
Is there a second? Director
Second.
Leonard. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director O'Halloran's motion, seconded by Director Leonard, to approve the item number 2, the recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments, and reclassifications, salary increases and decreases, and the limited term employment contracts exceeding 60 days. On the motion as read, Director Carr?
Aye.
Director Gopal Gandhi?
Aye.
Director Jackson?
Aye.
Director Leonard?
Aye.
Director O'Halloran?
Aye.
Director Simpson?
Aye.
Director Zombor?
Aye.
Chair Herndon?
Aye.
That's 8 ayes, the motion passes.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, are there any other items that were set aside?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do have 2 other items that were set aside. And at this point, I guess the board has an option of reading both items into the record and then going into closed session to consider both items, or taking one item at a time.
What is, Director O'Halloran?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we have some people here who are waiting for their congratulations. So if you got a promotion, if you were hired, thank you for bringing your talents to serve the students in the community of Milwaukee. Go forth and do great things. And now I return us to the regularly scheduled meeting. Thank you, Madam President.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair, the 3 items that have been deferred to the end of the meeting, all have a closed session attached to them. So I will read each of the items and their exceptions so that the board could take care of all 3 items while in closed session.
Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
The first item is the report of the independent hearing officers of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors, which is action on the reports of the independent hearing officers of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors, their student expulsions. The second item is the consideration and action to not renew the administrator contract for the position of Director of Office of Board Governance and the Board Clerk effective upon its expiration March 31st, 2024. The exception that allows the board to go into closed session is Wisconsin Statutes 19.85, Parent 1, Parent C. And the last item is action on a request to retire to closed session relative to crime detection and prevention strategies and follow-up to Resolution 2223R-006.
Thank you very much. If there are no more items to set aside, then we'll continue on We have 2 items of regular business. Is that it?
Yes, the next 2 items are of regular business, and that is 1, the report of the board's delegate. The first report is that of the board's delegate to CISA number 1.
Would the delegate like to make any remarks?
Yes, the report is before you. I did want to just highlight that WASPA, Wisconsin Association of School Personnel Administrators, will be hosting their first ever Wisconsin Educator Shortage Summit on October 12th and 13th in Madison, and details, all stakeholders are invited, and details can be found on the waspa.org site, and the other details of the report can be found as attached.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
The next report is of the board's delegate to the library board.
Would that delegate like to make remarks?
Sorry, yep, that report is before you, and I would just like to say that they've had a review done by a group called In Power, which is working with MPL, and the 2 people who presented at the library about that are graduates from MPS, and they did a wonderful, amazing job, and they are just very happy to be bringing their business back to the Milwaukee community, and very proud that they graduated from Milwaukee Public Schools.
Thank you very much. The next one is, I guess, myself.
Yes, Madam President, the next report is that monthly report of the President of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors, and that is item number 2.
Thank you. My report is attached, and if you have any questions, please reach out to me, and I can answer them. Madam Secretary, what is next?
The next item for consideration would have been unfinished business, and there is no unfinished business. There are also no items of new business, and we have no communications this month. So before you would be the one resolution that was submitted, and that is Resolution 2324R-3 by Directors Herndon and Zombor on a building lease policy.
Okay, this will be referred to the Committee on Legislation, Rules, and Policies. Madam Secretary, was that the last item on our agenda?
Madam Chair, that was the last item of regular business, and now we are to the items that were deferred to closed session. And at this time, if you could read into the record the item title and the exception that allows you to go into closed session for each of the items.
At this time, I will entertain a motion to retire to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, paren 1, paren C, for the purpose of considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the board has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. And at this time, I will entertain a motion to retire to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, paren 1, paren F, to consider financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data or involved in such problems or investigations. At this time, I will entertain a motion to retire to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, paren 1, paren D, for the purpose of considering strategy for crime detection or prevention. May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, before you make the motion,
I see a few board members looking like, what is going on? No, so the second exception that you read into the record has to do with expulsions and individuals who may be considered for expulsion, just so that the administration and the public is clear.
Thank you very much. May we have a motion, please? Director O'Halloran.
I move we retire to closed session.
Second, please.
Second?
Director Gokul Gandhi. Will the secretary please call the roll?
On Director O'Halloran's motion, seconded by Director Gokul Gandhi, to retire to closed session to consider items from the reports of the independent hearing officers, the reports and communications from the board clerk, and the reports and communications from the superintendent. So items under all three areas. On the motion as read, Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Jackson.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Zombor.
Aye.
Chair Herndon.
Aye.
That's 8 ayes, the motion passes.
There being no further business before the board,
Madam Chair, at this time, we will retire to executive session, and the secretary will note the time
Okay.
of going into closed session. So noted.
thank you.
Yes.
This meeting of... Oh, okay. This meeting of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors will once again come to order. The board has been in a closed session on action for the request. You crossed that all out. Okay. We were fixing this quickly. To continue, number one was the action on report of the independent hearing officers of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors student expulsions. Number two, consideration and action to not renew the administrator's contract for the position of Director of Office of Board Governance, Board Clerk, effective upon its expiration March 31st, 2024. What is the pleasure of the board with respect to item 1? Director O'Halloran.
I move to modify the reports of the independent hearing officers to change the expulsion reinstatement date for expulsions number 1, 2, 10, and 11 from May 21st, 2027 to May 21st, 2024, and with the modifications, accept the reports of the independent hearing officers.
Thank you very much. Could I have a second?
Second that motion.
Director Gokul Gandhi did the second. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On the motion as read into the record, Director Carr?
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi?
Aye.
Director Jackson?
Aye.
Director Leonard?
Aye.
Director O'Halloran?
Aye.
Director Simpson?
Aye.
Director Zombor?
Aye.
Chair Herndon?
Aye.
That's 8 ayes, the motion passes.
Thank you. The next item is consideration and action to not review the administrator contract for the position of Director of Office of Board Governance, Board Clerk, effective upon its expiration date, March 31st, 2024. What is the pleasure of the board with respect to this item? Director Zombor.
I move that the board not renew the contract for the position of Director of the Office of Board Governance, Board Clerk, effective upon its expiration on March 31st, 2024.
Thank you. We need a second on this item.
I'll second.
Director Simpson.
I'll second.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On the motion as read into the record by Director Zombor, seconded by Director Simpson. Director Carr?
No.
Director Gokul Gandhi?
Aye.
Director Jackson?
No.
Director Leonard?
Aye.
Director O'Halloran?
Aye.
Director Simpson?
Aye.
Director Zombor?
Aye.
Chair Herndon?
Aye.
That's 6 ayes, 2 noes, the motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. That is the last item for us to vote on for tonight.
That is correct.
Okay. If there's no further business at this time, this meeting is adjourned.